on a Sunday afternoon. Uh, just want to start out by thanking a few people to make this happen. And of course, Mary Burns is top on my list. She's on the board, and she stepped up and headed up our nominations committee at the very last minute and got 5 wonderful people to be here with us today. So Mary, thank you so much. We really appreciate it. Also want to thank Diane Sidorowicz, my co-chair, who's from Dignity Boston. She's been great. She helped vet it, your profiles, and she and I will be counting the ballots soon. And I also want to huge thanks to Darby. Darby at the office has been just fantastic to get everything ready to go. All the ballots are out, the paper ballots, the electronic ballots. Can't do it without her. So I just want to thank Darby. And we have Marianne and Melly, who are actually at this moment in a hotel room in Detroit, celebrating Detroit's 50th anniversary. Super excited. They had a great dinner last night with over 130 people. They're going to have a great mass tonight. So there they are. Yay! Our superstars. So they'll be helping monitor the chat behind me. So what we're going to do, every candidate's going to have 5 minutes to tell us who they are and why they want to be on the board. And then we're going to deal with questions in the chat first. And I'll also just want to remind you guys, up in the upper left-hand corner, if you all click speaker view, you'll be able to speak clearly if you'd like, and join in on the conversation. But we're going to deal with the questions in the chat first for the candidates after they give their talk, and then we'll take some live commentary, and that should take us to the top of the hour. At the very end, I'll go over the specific dates for the election, but I'll say that for the end. So without further ado, our first candidate is from Northeast Ohio, Susan Russell. Susan, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. Thank you, everyone from Dignity USA, for those of you on here live and those of you who will see this later. I am from, as he said, Northeast Ohio, and Sean Miller and I formed Dignity Northeast Ohio almost a year ago. We're not quite, well, we started as a chapter in formation, and we finally became a chapter. And I'm going to have to verify the date with Marianne and Darby, but I think we got the email about it on August 10th, 2023. I first became aware of Dignity Northeast Ohio when I decided to pursue something that was on my heart for many years. In 2020. With the isolation of COVID, I finally decided to go forward with what I feel is my call to the priesthood. And as I was teamed with somebody from Dignity Dayton, the Living Beatitudes community, I started attending their services on Zoom and just fell in love with the goal and the mission of Dignity USA. I also started graduate school at John Carroll to pursue a degree in theology. And on my very first semester, we were supposed to write about a theologian we admired. I asked my professor for guidance on this, and I said, I'm very passionate about the role of women in the church and also about how LGBTQIA individuals are treated. He recommended John McNeil, and I am so glad that he did. I pursued the study of John McNeil, learned about dignity, was able to actually view the film that Brendan Fay made about John McNeil, even though it wasn't in circulation at the time. It was a labor of love to learn more about this, about dignity and about the plight that happens with LGBTQIA individuals in the Catholic Church. I really do believe that our church would have been much farther ahead had they listened to John McNeil at the time. And unfortunately, we're still struggling with these issues. I am also a gender affirming therapist. I was certified through the World Professional Association for Transgender Health. So I feel very strongly about inclusion and supporting the rights of our transgender brothers and sisters. Trying to think what else I should say. Oh, I know that we were asked what our priorities should be, and I don't feel like I'm in a position to broadcast what I think the priorities should be. I'll learn a lot more about that if I'm chosen to be on the board. But I do feel like our transgender and non-binary individuals are being so persecuted by a lot of legislations across our country and by, unfortunately, the Catholic Church. So I really think supporting those individuals would be one of my primary goals, as long as the rest of the board members agree with that, and I assume that they would. And I think I'm at the limit of my time, so I will turn it back to you. Thank you
Wow.
very much.
Thank you, Susan. You have 2 more minutes to go. Wow. You sure you don't want to use your 2 minutes?
I'll give them to somebody else.
Very kind. Okay, the next person is Mr. Tom Yates from Washington, D.C. Tom, the floor is yours.
Okay, thank you. My name is Tom Yates. I've been with Dignity Washington for 40 plus years now. This isn't my first time on the national board. Dignity USA is, I think, in a much better shape, both financially and sort of liturgically and legally and all the ways that matter than they were when I was first on the board. I think it was in 2006. And I said in my statement the issues we had with financial and which was sort of eye-opening. I got a phone call from Mary Ann Doty Burke asking me if I would run, and I agreed to run, and almost immediately started getting emails from the board and discovered how in what bad shape we were financially. And it was sort of like, what have I got myself into? Because I really considered a board member to be responsible for the organization and ways that are financial. And so immediately got to work doing some fundraising. So much has improved since Mary Ann took over the reins of the organization. The membership of the board and the leadership of the board have been very good for the last 20 years. So that's the sort of thing I think I'd like to maintain and make sure we're sort of financially stable, that our mission stays the same. And I think we have a real big battle with, unfortunately, it's our allies, the allegedly welcoming Catholic churches who have been eating our lunch. They've been taking our membership because people feel comfortable going there, even though those places will never marry us, or not in any time in the immediate future. They will bless us now, though they'll bless a battlefield or a battleship or a horse in a horse race. So we're sort of on par with hardware and livestock. So I don't feel all that enthralled by them blessing us. But I think our membership is a real issue. And I think we need to maintain that and sort of point out the differences between us and those friendly Catholic churches. So I don't know what else to say other than you'd be a fool not to vote for me. I guess that's all I really need to say at this point. So I'll yield the rest of my time.
Wow, wow, you guys are really killing it. Okay, let's go to John Shum from Boston.
Thank you, Daniel. Boy, these are two hard acts to follow. They're not acts. These are more than acts. This is, real life. So I'll try my best. But I'm in the second year of my first term on the Dignity USA Board of Directors. It's my first experience being on the board. I came to it kind of late in life, as opposed to many other people who run for the board. I was well into my retirement and kind of called out of my retirement to run for the board, which I was ready to do at that point in my life. I was not really ready to do that previously. So it came at the right time. And much of my work with Dignity USA has been with the Caucus on Aging, which I've been facilitating for the last couple of years, few years by now. And that's growing. The big project that we worked on this past year was a collaboration with SAGE, which is a well-known organization that works on advocacy for LGBT elders. And they did a training for our membership, particularly around developing advocacy skills in terms of long-term residential care for older adults and how we can seek out and advocate for quality care, for welcome and affirming care, for culturally appropriate care in long-term care facilities. So we've learned some skills that we're going to carry with us well into the future. We also did a workshop at the virtual gathering back in April, I think. So, and we're able to tell a couple of stories about older members in our communities, you know, that people have been working with. One of the really exciting projects I was able to work on this past year was the World Youth Day send-off, which took place here in Boston back in July. It was just a joyous event, you know, being able to commission and bless our pilgrims who went off to World Youth Day in Portugal. And I was able to help with the planning of that. And I hope that it's something that we can do again, no matter where our pilgrims may be leaving from. It was just a really special event. So, Louis, Lesmeyer and I are board liaisons to the National Conference Committee. So we've begun to do that work, begun to look at our conference, our in-person conference next year in Columbus, and work on planning that. And also coming up very soon is an intergenerational faith sharing event. This is in collaboration among 3 of our caucuses, the Aging Caucus, the Women of Dignity, and the Unadult Caucus. We're going to do an event on June 3rd, a faith sharing event followed with some discussion, something we have talked about for a long time, doing something across generations in our membership. I guess what was motivated me to run for the board the first time and the second time is that I you know, deeply value and deeply cherish and deeply love my Dignity membership, my Dignity engagement over the years. It's meant a lot to me. It's been transforming in many, many ways. It's actually where I met my husband, Ron, right here at Dignity Boston. So as I said earlier, I just felt like it was the right time to be able to give something back and to bring whatever experiences and skills I might have to the board. And I'm, you know, willing to do that for a second term if the membership deems that, you know, a good choice. I'm also a contributor for the Breath of the Spirit, which I take a turn writing a summary or a commentary on the Sunday scriptures, which I really enjoyed as well too. Priorities, membership is always a priority, I think, for every board, and growing our membership is certainly a priority. And I think other priorities are a continuation of what we're doing and have been doing. One is simply to be vigilant, locally, nationally, globally, to join forces and to join voices with other like-minded LGBT Catholic organizations around issues that affect our lives and the lives of LGBTQI persons around the globe. And the other thing that intrigues me a lot is the synod process. The synod continues this fall, round 2. We had a very robust presence at the synod last fall in Rome, which led, as many of you know, to Marianne being able to meet Pope Francis. And you've all seen that wonderful photo. So the synod continues this fall, and our board right now is figuring out what kind of presence we may have at the synod. But I'm curious to see where the synod's going to lead us. It's not just a one-time meeting. If it should be a process that's going to continue and could really work to our benefit as well within the church. So that's me. That's what I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you, John. Perfect. That's 5 minutes and a perfect segue to Kate, who was one of our wonderful pilgrims that went to Portugal. Kate is from Northern Maryland, if I remember correctly. When I had the pleasure of meeting Kate a few weeks ago when the young adults came to DC. It was a wonderful weekend. Kate, the floor is yours.
Thank you. And I would feel remiss if I didn't start off by thanking John for what a wonderful job he did with that send-off in Boston. That was truly a beautiful experience. And actually, I went to college in Boston at Emmanuel and had a close friend that came and visited the send-off, and that was his first introduction to Dignity, which he said made him immediately ready to join in San Francisco. So thank you, John, again, for the wonderful work you did on that. So my name's Kate. My pronouns are they, them, and I'm from Columbia, Maryland, which is just outside of Baltimore. And I got involved with Dignity when I was really looking for a way to hold my identities as a Catholic human and as an LGBTQ human in the same space. I had dealt with a really negative homily at my home parish that actually led to multiple parishioners coming up to me afterwards and saying, see, the priest said it, you can't take communion. And knew that I needed to go somewhere else. So I emailed every single parish in Montgomery County, my home at that time, and asked if I would be welcome there as someone who identifies as bisexual and non-binary. And the responses I got ranged in everything from people calling me and telling me how absurd I was, to people responding with, basically well, we love everybody, but just be quiet about that. To someone recommending some LGBTQ resources for me and sending me a list of conversion therapy spaces. So needless to say, it was pretty disheartening. So then I decided to do my own research, and that's when I found Dignity USA. I was kind of a passive participant for a few months, just watching the emails, seeing what came up. And the first email that I found that I decided, you know what, it's time to join the Zoom meeting, was for the annual meeting, where I heard Darby and Marianne speak about our presence that we were planning on at World Youth Day. And that was something that I prayed on, because I was like, okay, if I do this, this will be the first thing that I've actually done in person with this organization. I don't know if I'm the person for this, God, what do I do? And then as I was praying on this, I saw a follow-up email from Darby that said, hey, I hope you'll apply. So when I went to World Youth Day last year in Portugal, it was life-changing. Seeing the amount of people that came up to us that were so excited to see someone wearing a pride flag at a Catholic event, proud to hold those two identities, made me feel so optimistic about our future. And that's what motivates me to run for the board. Dignity USA is a space where faith comes alive, because it's a place where people know that they are welcomed holistically for every single aspect of who they are. And that creates real change. One of the most profound conversations I had at World Youth Day was with a teenager from Minnesota who looked at me and said, what makes you think that God loves you as much as he loves me? And I said, well, because that's kind of God's thing. He loves everybody, no matter who we are, no matter what we do, he loves us all. And that kid just paused and sat there, and I said, you do know that God loves you, right? No matter who you are, no matter what you do. And it was the first time anyone had told him that. And I love Dignity USA because this is a space where we don't ever have to question whether God loves each of us. So when I got back from World Youth Day, I started working on the Breath of the Spirit writing team, which helped me to deepen my faith even further. And as I got involved with our leadership roles and stuff, with that group that I went to World Youth Day with, it inspired me to share more stories of queer joy within the Catholic faith. Those moments where LGBTQ individuals are able to be themselves and to hold that Catholic identity. And as a member of the board, that's what I really want to put forward in our next 3 to 5, even 10 years. Looking at those stories of how LGBTQ Catholics are doing amazing work, are living as themselves just as they are, and being God's love in the world. Because I think that's where we're able to carry ourselves through as full Catholic members, because people can see that we are Christians, that we are Catholics, that we are here to love others just as much as they are. I also come to the board with a little bit of nonprofit board experience after having served on the Damascus Community Fair for now 3 years. And in that board, it's been a lot of fundraising, a lot of working on different, more technical projects. And so I know that I bring the right degree of passion combined with practical experience to be able to bring us forward into our next 5 to 10 years. So thank you all so much for joining or for listening to this later, and I hope I can count on your vote.
Thank you so much, Kate. Wow, that's wonderful. Okay, Jason, you are up.
Okay. Good afternoon. I'm Reverend Father Jason Carson Wilson. I'm an ordained United Church of Christ minister and ordained Catholic, convergent Catholic communion priest. And seeds for that ordination as a priest were planted by my participation in Dignity, particularly Dignity Washington. As a Black gay cisgender man, I bring a unique perspective to the board, one that is deeply committed to fostering diversity and inclusivity within our organization. My passion for diversity isn't just about representation, but ensuring that Dignity Dignity USA truly reflects the rich tapestry of identities within our community. I believe our strength lies in that diversity, and I'm dedicated to helping Dignity USA become more diverse in every way. I'm also passionate about helping Dignity USA live into a commitment to being more prophetic. We're definitely called to be a voice of change and have been a voice of change and have challenged the status quo that envisions a future where everyone is treated with dignity and respect. We've done so thanks to the leadership of our Executive Director, Marianne Burke. I think there are more ways to challenge the status quo, including increasing Dignity USA's racial, gender expression, gender identity, and sexual orientation diversity. Working to lift the voices of our marginalized members and harnessing social media to expand our reach is important as well. We must really find ways to connect to new people in order to spread our message and create a larger membership base. I'm committed to helping create advocacy and worship resources that supports our membership, expands our reach, and puts us in front of a new audience. Doing so, of course, helps create new sources of financial support. I bring 8 years of LGBTQIA advocacy and communications experience to the table. That experience includes presenting at a Dignity USA Youth Caucus event and speaking at a United Nations event focused on denouncing discrimination and violence against LGBTQIA+ people. I've done extensive federal policy advocacy, including working with a coalition to champion the Equality Act. I'm eager to continue serving on Dignity USA's board of directors to contribute my skills, experience, and passion to further our mission. I'm confident that together we can make Dignity USA a beacon of hope, continue to make Dignity USA a beacon of hope, inclusivity, and love. Thank you.
Thank you, Jason. Wow, you guys, wow, wonderful. Woo. Okay, let's go to some questions. Marianne and Melly, do we have anything in the chat? No. I see you guys popped on.
So one question that we've had come up is just with thinking about our commitment to diversity. I think this is a question for all of our candidates. What particular skills or perspectives do you bring to the board to help us increase our diversity and our efforts towards diversity?
Who would like to start on that one? I'm off mute and Kate.
I can start off.
Okay, Kate, go ahead.
Yeah, so I started working in January as a substitute teacher in Gaithersburg, Maryland, which is consistently one of the top 10 most diverse cities in the entire country. And most recently, I believe their ranking was in the top 5 even of that list. And teaching in that community, one of the things that's always stood out to me is the amount of my students across the board that come into class wearing rosaries or crucifixes or other like very subtle symbols of their Catholic faith, especially over the last month when I've been teaching ESOL and we just had a new student come in from Cameroon, and it's been even seeing her immediately meshing with a lot of the students because of that shared faith. And yet, even though we know that the Catholic Church is incredibly diverse, when we look at even with on this call and who's running for the board, we're not seeing that racial diversity reflected. And so a lot of it for me is having conversations with others in those communities and being bold enough to say, like, hey, have you heard about us? Do you know anyone who might be interested in this? So that we can figure out, one, if there's a disconnect, where we need to change. Is there something that we're doing that is putting out some sort of, whether it's a microaggression or whether it's something that's outright hostile, if that is why we're not seeing the racial diversity reflected in our organization that we should have. And also being willing to even just mention it, because in the case of a lot of my coworkers that I've talked with who have LGBTQ youth in their life that they're trying to look out for and that they're trying to make sure have these sorts of opportunities so that they don't feel alone, they've never heard of us. And so a lot of the times it's being willing to have those conversations and to look outside of your immediate network. I mean, my position at Shady Grove, I've only had for gosh, I've been there for about 3-4 weeks now. But it's still being willing to be vulnerable and being willing to have those conversations, even when it's those softer network connections, because that's how we expand and how we reach out to include more diversity.
Thank you. Thank you. Anyone else? Jason?
This is Jason. So I think I bring lived experience in bridging, building bridges. I mean, as someone who was born as a biracial man, raised in predominantly white spaces, both also doing work within the context of the media, which is a predominantly white organization, and then moving into ministry, I've really developed the necessity, not only professionally, but as a person of color, it is necessary for people of color to be able to build bridges and be able to operate in different spaces. And so I bring those skills of building bridges that would help us, usher in more diverse groups of people into our space. And I think my passion for also embracing new ideas, new concepts, which I think my moving from being a Protestant minister to now being both a Protestant and Catholic priest is also a testament to my willingness to embrace differences and bridging differences.
Thank you. Anybody else? Susan? Oh, sorry, John. Get you. Go ahead, Susan.
Obviously, as a white woman and a cisgender heterosexual person, I realize that my demographics do not represent diversity other than being female. But I'm also a social worker, which I didn't mention, and a gender affirming therapist. I would say that's the area where I have the most experience, but I do really agree that we need to bring a lot more diversity to our membership and to our board.
Thank you. John?
From my perspective, like diversity within the aging population and working with the Aging with Dignity Caucus, part of our training that I mentioned earlier with SageCare, that among the issues we raised was the fact that most of us who are at that training are like me, mostly cisgendered gay men, but also there were some of the women too in our community who also joined us. So we're all cisgender, and listening to our trainer go on about the challenges that the aging population is facing in our communities. But one of the things that we spent time on was, and we've also talked about this too in our caucus meetings, is what about the experience of transgender persons who age? It's completely different, than it is for me, and transgender persons who have to go into elder care, run up against incredible obstacles. And I think that part of what we need to pay attention to within the caucus, for instance, is that the experience of transgender persons as they age, because they are in our communities as well, and being able to share advocacy skills with them and to be able to advocate for them and with them, I think is really important going forth. So I think there's this need for diversity within, the prospect of issues around aging too, that we're trying to address in our community.
Thank you. Anybody else? Tom?
Yeah, this is something that we have struggled with at Dignity Washington because we are largely white and male. We have a few African Americans, a few Asians, very few women, and a few non-binary or transgender people. And I think it's a different issue for Dignity USA than it is, say, for a chapter, because certainly for the chapter, when people do come, it is a sea of white elderly men. And I think that's a real issue for bringing in new membership that I think the national organization doesn't have the same kind of issue. When you join the national organization as a member, you are not faced with that sea of white people. I know Northern Virginia has a much smaller group, but they are, I think, almost 50% women, which is remarkable. But I think it's a matter of sort of critical mass, for women to walk in and see a group that is, nearly 50% women. It's, I think, much more inviting for them. So it is a problem. I think we need to work on it. And I don't really have a really, really quick answer for that.
Thank you. Marianne and Melly, any other things in the chat?
There's nothing else in the chat right now, but friends, please feel free to come off mute and voice your questions right here in this forum.
If you want to raise your hand, we can see you in the chat. Anybody? Come on, Mary. I know you've got something to ask. Mary Burns. Oh, you're on mute.
I just had to take a quick phone call, so I'm sorry I missed those last few minutes, but I think all of you sound like you're great people, so why do we only have 4 votes? That's what I want to know. But I think, we're going to be in good company. So I've been on the board. I was on for a 2-year period, then off for a little bit, and then back on.
So Mary, while you're in the hot seat, I want to ask you a question. So
thanks.
Being a current board member, though, what do you see the priorities of the board, of the future board?
Well, I think we're working very hard together to make sure we are in a stable financial position. I think that's one thing. I think the diversity we've always had that in mind, is something that we need to be paying attention to. I've told a lot of people we need to get younger people, because some of us are getting up there. But I really think that the advocacy and the speaking out on issues is probably one of the most important things that the board does, through Mary Ann, of course. And, the list of things that Mary Ann does in a given month will just knock your socks off. She does a lot of work and, gives us some examples of things to follow and comment on as well. So I really appreciate her leadership in that. And Melly's just a ball of energy as a new young person leading the board. And, she'll keep us hopping, let me tell you.
As her vice president, I can second that.
Yeah.
So Melly, how about you? Any kind of ideas about the next couple of years?
And I think that we've all hit on it. I think one of the main priorities we have to have is making sure we have a stable financial future. Because as we've all said, the work that Dignity USA does is as critical now as it was 55 years ago when we began. But as funding sources change and our community ages, we do need to find ways to ensure we have continued financial stability and that we're replenishing our membership and thinking about the ways that people interact with our organization. So that might be paid membership, that might be showing up to our Advent series, our Lent series, coming to our different events, just thinking about the ways that people affiliate with us and making sure that we are providing those opportunities. I think those are, and of course, a commitment to diversity, which I think is critical, again, as we think about growing that membership. So I think those are the top things that come to mind for me.
And Mary Ann, while I've got you in the picture, I know you've done a lot of work on the international scene. Any kind of thoughts about, diversity and international outreach? I know you've been tireless in reaching out to people all over the globe.
Yeah, I think in some ways that ties in a lot with the Synod work, right? This awareness, ever increasing, that we are one church and that it is becoming increasingly both possible and important that we interact globally is really important. I'm just really proud of the work that Dignity has done from its very beginning on the international stage. Groups like Acceptance in Australia and Quest and David and Jonathan, and even groups in the Ukraine now wouldn't exist, groups in Brazil, without Dignity's leadership. and to continue to be a leader and a supporter of emerging groups on the international stage feels really important. And I hope that all the candidates, have followed that work, have engaged in it, as some of you have mentioned, and continue to think that's important. So,
Okay, I'm
I
going to
don't know
ask
if there's a question in there, but
Kate. So, how do we get more young people involved? What are young people? What are they looking for these days that we're missing?
Sorry, I had my computer malfunctioning there for a second. I think the biggest thing is finding community that is not going to cost us a fortune. And what I mean by that, so many of the things that people in Gen Z would think to do for fun, that for previous generations, it would be, you work a 9-to-5 job, you go to a coffee shop, and, you have money that you're not stressing about how much that coffee is going to cost you. Or same thing with if you're going out to a bar afterwards, or to a restaurant, to a concert. Whereas for my generation, talking with so many people, 9-to-5 job is not paying the bills. And so on top of that, I've known so many people in my generation that are working multiple jobs just to make ends meet, which then makes time so limited and you're so exhausted. And then on top of that, there's not the money there to be able to pay to go out and do things. And so it's this question of, how can I find community that's not going to cost me money and that's not going to cost me more energy? And I think when we create opportunities that offer those spaces for rest and for really positive connections, especially when we have free events, that's where we're really going to bring more young people in. I met Sam, who's now one of my best friends, through DignityUSA. And that was just realizing, when I was going through a hard time, and at this point, we had just met each other over video chat and stuff. It was knowing that that was a person that I could just be like, hey, I just want to be in the same space as another human. And they were like, yes, absolutely. Sounds great. And if more people knew that this was a space where you could build those kinds of connections, I think we would get in a lot more people. It's also, again, going back to that energy thing, knowing that this is a space where you can come to restore your spirit, as opposed to just having one more thing that's taken away from it. When I went to our Young Leaders Retreat that we had a couple of weeks ago, where I had the pleasure of meeting Daniel in person for the first time, that was something where I was looking forward to it, because I knew that even though we were going to have hard discussions and get a lot of work done, it was also going to be a weekend that I got to spend with people who make me a better person and who make me excited to be on this earth. And it was something that, while I knew I was doing important work, I also knew that I was going to come out of that with my spirit feeling refilled. And I feel like if we can really tell those sorts of things, that's where we're going to get young people that are like, yes, this is something that is worth whatever time I have, that because I'm going to get so much out of it, that this isn't just something that's taken away from what little is left.
Thank you. Thank you. Any questions for anybody? You, Mary.
I just have maybe a question or a comment. I'm sorry I had to take a quick phone call, and the person who called me is a gay man from Columbus, Ohio, who just went to an ordination ceremony for a very young friend who's a priest. And what he described was like, not the church I would want to be a part of, but the Catholics and everything. And he said, well, that's really hard for a lot of people. Maybe there is a place for that in some world, but not for everybody. And I think that's what we have to remember with young people, is choice has to be available. I come from a large family. I have 21 nieces and nephews, 18 of whom I think went to Catholic school, and maybe 2 of them go to church. Go to any church. So, life has changed for them much differently, and maybe in ways that it hasn't changed for me. But, they also probably have some needs that really aren't being met either. So I get concerned about that at times.
Absolutely. Okay.
I have just a quick comment and to sort of bolster what both Kate and Mary said. I remember reading research well before COVID that said that 30% of people go to church for community. And I think now after COVID, that number is probably a larger percentage. And I think that's one of the most important things that we have to keep in mind. Obviously, yes, liturgy, worship are an important elements of the church experience. However, community is also one of those important things. I mean, I will say that in going to Dignity Washington and going to Mass, yes, I get a lot out of Mass, but it always feels like the dinner that I go to with a group of my irreverent fellow Dignity members, it's almost like that dinner experience is sort of the icing on the Mass cake. And so I feel like that's also one of the things that we really need to keep in mind, as both Mary and Kate have alluded to, the importance of community.
Well, as one of those people that joined Jason at dinner, we probably get kicked. We probably close down the restaurant when we go out. Yeah, they put us in the timeout room.
I was trying to behave, Daniel.
Any other comments? I'm going to give you. You guys are going to be lucky. I'm going to give you back about 15 minutes of your Sunday afternoon. And you notice I'm wearing red, so happy Pentecost, everybody. So, go ahead, Tom. Did you have something? Okay, just a quick thing. Darby, again, as I mentioned, sent out all the ballots. Very few paper ballots went out, but quite a few electronic ballots were out. So everybody has until midnight on June 30th to send in their electronic ballot. And paper ballots will be honored if we get them by June 30th. So we suggest that you mail them by Monday, the 24th of June, to give you about a week for our wonderful U.S. Postal Service to get us the mail-in ballots. And then Diane and I will be counting them. We will then record the count to the board secretary, Sam Albano, who will then ask the board to certify the election at their July meeting. And the new board members will be sworn in on October 1st. Marianne, I think I got that right. Yay. Any last words from our wonderful executive director?
No, just thank you so much for everybody being part of the process, for those of you who are running, for those of you who are here to do this. I think that, having the majority of Dignity USA's board has always be elected by our members has always been a really important accountability structure for us. And really appreciate people's commitment to doing this. Unfortunately, Melly just got a work call and stepped off, so I know she would want to extend her thanks to everybody too, and we're really excited to see how the outcome is, and thanks to everybody for volunteering to run.
And there was a quick question. We have 4 slots and we have 5 candidates, so only vote for 4 people, and we will see what will happen. Thank you, everybody. And again, congratulations, Dignity Detroit. All blessed wishes for the Mass tonight. Thank you.